A global scramble is underway to identify and perhaps replicate unidentified mystery material that's been collected in multiple sites around the world.
A few of the samples have defied analysis by leading scientists who say they don't know how the material was engineered or why or by whom.
Now, some of this meta material was allegedly collected in connection with UFO incidents, which gives the whole endeavor another worldly glow. The I-Team's George Knapp has the story and the Las Vegas connection.
Multi-layered bismuth and magnesium sample. Bismuth layers less than a human hair. Magnesium samples about 10 times the size of a human hair. Supposedly picked up in the crash retrieval of an advanced aerospace vehicle.
In Las Vegas back in June, physicist Hal Puthoff came pretty close to saying that this weird wedge of metamaterial came from a crashed saucer, but he can't know for sure. Puthoff and his colleague Dr. Eric Davis are on the cutting edge of attempts to identify an assortment of bits and pieces that are seemingly beyond anything we can create. This one sample is engineered in layers thinner than microns through a process unknown on Earth, and for a purpose we can only guess.
Nowhere could we find any evidence that anybody ever made one of these. When we talked to people who, in the materials field, who should know, they said, we don't know why anybody would want to make anything like this.
In order to appreciate the gravity of what was just explained in the previous clip, I believe we have to define the term micron for those of you not familiar with it. A micron or micrometer is 1/1,000,000th of a meter. So small that a human hair, which is about 50 to 100 microns thick, seems massive in comparison. At this scale of measurement, light waves, which range from 400 to 700 nanometers, interact strongly with structures, and quantum effects can begin to emerge. Metamaterials exploit these precise dimensions, arranging features at the micron and submicron scale to manipulate electromagnetic waves in ways nature never intended. As an engineer myself, these compelling materials would enable essentially the impossible, including invisibility cloaks, super lenses, and materials with negative refractive indices. Control at the micron level doesn't just reshape materials. It rewrites the rules of physics from what we've come to learn.
And you're lucky you even heard me. But Art, he's a character, man. He had to ask all kinds of questions. So what was life like for me when I was growing up? Well, let me kind of give you an idea. The first rocket I built, I was 12 years old, the one that I launched, the very first one. The engine is a liquid-fueled type rocket. It has little cryogenic pumps in it where we're pumping a fluid 400 below zero. Okay, can you imagine handling that stuff? So you might heard on our belt, well, how did you have such access to things? Well, my dad worked for a guy named Lee Petty, and he has a son named Richard. I don't know if you ever heard of these guys. No? Well, yes, Winston Cup about 100 times. They're the most famous race car drivers on Earth, and they drive these stock cars. And my dad worked for them about 20 years. So they had state-of-the-art high-performance machine shops. Bigger than this, and if you knock all the walls out in this building, it's twice the size of this building. So huge machine shops, and these machine shops are built for one thing. What? Speed. So I'm looking at all this, and I'm 12 years old. My dad's having me overhauling 426 Chrysler Hemis. I could overhaul one of them things in 3.5 hours. Talk to a garage next time. Well, this guy can do them in 3 hours. It'll be 3 weeks, buddy, before we can get your car back. So we could do everything fast, but I could really do these engines. With 2 4-barrels on these engines, they turn 675 horsepower. Pretty big engines. And I'm 12 years old, and I'm learning to do that. And the Honer weighs more than I do to get them in blocks. That's how can you end up something like that. So anyhow, during the day, I was working these things, and everybody goes home, and what do I have laying there as far as the eye can see? All of these presses and lathes and machines, which I now know how to run. Also, the fuels in this building. They have things called fuelie, drag racers. We have methane, nitro, liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen. We have kerosene. We got gasoline. I mean, man, basement farmer dream. I can do anything in here. So the Petties let me work in there, and they said, "Whatever you do, Dave, don't blow up the place, okay?" So I built my first rocket, and I took it home, and it was about this tall. And I set it up in the backyard. My little friends come over. We're all 12-year-old kids stand there. Now, most of us aren't even allowed to play with matches. Okay, I don't need a match, believe me. So all my friends have never seen me launch anything. They hear me talk about it and stuff. I said, "Well, build this thing." So they're standing there and they're looking for a 4th of July rocket. Psh, psh, that's it. Uh-uh. Um, I backed everybody up, and we backed up about the length of a football field. And they're going, "You're kidding." I said, they stand this far when they light a little bottle rocket and watch it go. I said, "I don't think you guys want to be standing that close when this thing goes." So they kind of know I'm strange anyhow. So they get behind trees and stuff like that. And I light this thing, and I do it remote control, wireless, just poof. When I hit a detonation, it goes off. It leaves the backyard, y'all, 3,500 miles an hour. Burns a hole the size of this room in the yard. Down to the roof. Thank you. I turned around and looked at my friends, right? Nothing but dust and little particles in the air like a cartoon. It's ping. My mother comes running out of the house. This thing you can hear 4 miles away. She runs out there and she looks at the yard just incinerated, smoking. So she sees this white thing going straight to the sky, and she just goes. And I'm standing there looking at her, and I go. So my mom looks back at me and she goes, "Where's your friends?" And I went, "Somewhere in the next county by now." I didn't see them for a week. They told me I was going to be beaten to next week. But anyhow, that thing's still huffing and puffing. The altimeter I had hooked onto it, 120,000 feet. That's ionosphere, folks. That's the last band of layer of atmosphere on the planet. It's about to go space out of my backyard. So I had it timed where it could come back in, delayed charge. I was counting the seconds like that, and then the wind shift and drift, and finally it comes back into sight. Parachutes come out, and the thing just starting to drift down, and I walk about from here to the back door and just catch it, and I had to let go of it real quick. It was so hot. But so while I'm standing there, we're watching it float back down to me, and I asked my mom, I said, "God, I am so weird. I'm not like everybody else. What is this?" And she looks at me and she goes, "Well, I'll tell you something. You didn't come from me. You came through me." It wasn't until 30-some years later with the metaphysic crowd that I figured out what my mom was trying to tell me. So, and then I was really worried. So, that was the first time we built a rocket. So you ask, well, how do you know how high up it went? It's real simple. You take a protractor. You ever seen them things, little half moon thing? You glue it to a board. You take a stick this long, screw it into the board, put 2 little eyelets on it, look through it like a rifle, and follow the rocket. You measure 500 feet from the pad. The cosine in trigonometry and table is cosine 1. Multiply that by 1 times 500, and then you get the reading off the protractor. Figure that into the calculation. Do your second clocks, and guess what? Altitude and speed you have in your hand. Now, the reason I make that point, it cost me $5.30 to make all this. NASA had the same thing at $12 million. And we both get the same accuracy. So, talk about overkill. On what? That's it. Well, you got to pay all these guys when you have 5 people sharpening pencils, at $40 an hour. So anyhow, that was the beginning of everything, and the rocket took off. Well, my mom and dad figured, it's time. My dad was practical, although he was. I was born in West Virginia. I was born in number 10 Pocahontas coal fields. I'm about 15th generation coal miner son. Glad to be a coal miner son. Anyway, so anyhow, my dad was a functional leader. He only went to 5th grade, but boy, he could build engines. So he also a very clear thinking person. You know, first thing he did after he came home, he saw the yard, and then he walked over to me and said, "I guess you don't want to mow grass too much, do you?" And he asked me, he's very quick to the point, where did you assemble and prep this thing? And I went, in the basement. He goes, uh-huh. Uh, so first thing Dad did, we got up early next morning and everything was moved out of the basement to about 500 yards away to this big old service station we used to have. And he set a huge machine shop up in there for me so I could use. So he told my mother, he said, well, Vanjie, if he blows up this time, he won't launch the house with us in it. The building will disintegrate. We'll just put a big stone over there. This is David, our son, who used to be here. So, but Dad was pretty cool. But now I had a big machine shop, and I mean, it had a full bathroom in it and a little bed area. And I lived there. Did not live with my parents. I lived in this place. And I'm 12 years old. I'm odd, y'all. So I started building these rockets, and the rockets got bigger, bigger, and faster. And I was all the time calling FAA for flight tables. You know why I'm doing that? I don't want to go punching a hole in the belly of an Easterner, you know, airliner going over. So at the time where everybody's at in the sky and go, boom, shooting things up to it. And FAA people going, what is this weird blip on the screen? Nothing moves 4,500 miles an hour now, you know. Some kind, and at that time, in the late 60s, UFO flap, like some kind of UFO, look at that, boom. But, and it was irregular. Hell yeah, the irregular. That's why I was shooting in between the airliners. So, anyhow, things were happy until something happened. I wasn't satisfied with these engines anymore. Got to build something bigger now. So, right about when I'm about 13, I come up with this idea of building a new type of engine. It's called a fusion magnetic containment engine. Now, most people really go, oh, that's nice. Well, let me give you some appreciation, okay? Imagine if I said, let's take a hydrogen warhead, like 100 megaton, that if it went off right here in this room with us, you won't have to worry about it. But people about 2 miles away, they'll blow a hole 2 miles in diameter and 1,000 feet deep. They'll raise the temperature to about 100 million degrees centigrade. Now we're going to take all that force and power, and we're now going to put it inside, appropriately, we're going to put it inside a bottle and contain it. Right, sure. So that's exactly what this engine does. Now, how can it? This sounds stupid. It can't possibly be true. And that's 3D rocket scientist people tell me that. I'm like, oh yeah? Well, check this out. There's only one thing that we know of that can bend light and space and time out in space, and only one thing we know of that can swallow a sun that disappears, and that's called a black hole. And thanks to a little guy named Stephen Hawkins, we were able to come up with quantum mechanics, in which he now proved that these theories are now fact. Well, but you got to know something. You know what year this is? It's 1967. It will be 20-some years, 22 years before you'll hear the term quantum mechanics. At age 7, I was working quantum mechanics, doing it all with the math and papers. So, I'm working on the mathematics of this thing, and it gets a little strange because I can't figure out some of the theorems on this thing, and I can't build an algorithm model. So, let me give you an appreciation of environment, okay? There are no faxes, no cellulars, no pagers, no beepers, no power books, no personal computers, no CD-ROMs, no cable television, no microwave ovens, and it'll be another 10 years before Texas Instruments builds the first handheld calculator. All I have is pencil and paper and chalkboards and a thing called a slide ruler. Anybody remember those? I see some hands. Well, anyway, which, by the way, I went at a yard sale. Do you remember the giant yellow one that was in a classroom? They could pull that thing around. I found one for $5. I got that thing hanging over my shop. And they go, what is that? Well, I know how old you are now. So, especially when girls ask me that, watch out, I'll get you. So, I'm working on this stuff and I can't do the calculations. It's just too taxing, it's too far out for the algorithms to hold the model to contain this field. Because what I want to do is build an artificial black hole. I can do that with dual cyclotrons, and I came up with a particle accelerator. Well, when the feeding system of the plasma drives, I don't want to go into it too detailed, but what that does is it creates an electromagnetic force field containment area that is the same intensity of a black hole. What does the black holes do? They swallow suns and they disappear and you never see them again. Obviously, you have a containment vessel for that power. Works pretty good, only if you can get the loop to close, and I couldn't. So my science teacher, could you imagine having me for a kid for a science class? I'm in 7th grade at the time. He looks at this work and goes, what is this? And I said, I'm working on my math on this rocket. Well, see, they dropped me out of algebra because I couldn't do it. And so he's looking at this. He goes, you want to work some of this for me? I said, sure, look at this. And he's going, geez. So can I borrow this for a minute? So he borrowed it and went to Ohio State University. I'm in Mount Vernon, Ohio at this town. And he showed the work to these guys in physics lab there, and they looked at it and go, where did you get this work? And it's in personal handwriting. Where'd you get Hawking's work? And they go, it's not Hawkins, it's this kid out here in Ohio in the cow fields launching rockets. So they look at this and they go, holy smokes. So they photocopy it. There's no email, no faxes. They put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and mail it. And it goes to Cambridge, England. In 3 weeks, there's a man at Ohio State that my science teacher takes me to meet, and he's working on some projects with a thing called Battelle Memorial. And I walk into the room, and there's this enormous calculation. We had big blackboards, big as this room, imagine going all the way around the room. So I walk in, I see all these calculations. The first thing I go is, who's got my work and messing with it, you know? This little guy on a cane stands up and he goes, your work indeed. I go, yeah. And I went, wait a minute. That's not my work. Besides, it's not right over there anyhow. He goes, really? You want to show me? Sure. Walk over there. Okay, wait. So anyway, write this stuff out. They look at it. He looks at it. And he goes, how do you qualify that? I go, rocket engine. And he goes, and he's looking at the connecting math I made, because what's interesting about his mathematics and mine, we're on parallel roads. He wants the theorems on all the black holes to show physically in physics how the mathematical equations can such a thing can exist. I'm a little bit beyond that. I just want a physical one built, 3D reality right here, and want to punch a hole in one end and let the power out. And he's going, oh man. So he's working on his stuff, and he asks, where are you getting all these equations from? And I went, oh boy, here we go. I went, dreams. Every night. And he drops a chalk. And I'm standing there going, that's the end of this conversation. I guess I'm out of here. So he turned around, and I'm already walking to the door. And he goes, wait a minute. He goes, everything I get in my math comes from dreams. We dream on the same wavelength. Therefore, your brothers have a seat. And we start working. So the equations we could only come to because of the algorithms, still we didn't have the computer power that we needed. We could get the field to hold for 5 seconds. Let me tell y'all, 5 seconds with a rocket engine is an eternity. That's plenty of time. So I left there and I went back to do some more testing. Now let me tell you about my test area. What are y'all laughing about? So, well, yeah, see, I'm out of the backyard. You're very, very observant. And not only am I out of the backyard, my launch site And now me and my lab has been moved about 1,000 yards away for blast reasons. I'm waiting for my dad to start building a big wall there for shrapnel debris when it goes off. But we had farmers. The farmers really interested in the area. They were very understanding, and these guys were in their 60s, and it's now 1967, and something been on TV for about 6 months. It's called Star Trek, the original episode. These old farmers were the hardcore trekkers you could ever meet. I couldn't believe it. And anyhow, their 4 farms, like this big screen, if you made like a window pane, came in 4 sections. They put me dead center in it. So I was surrounded by private property in all 360-degree radius. Pretty good place to have it. Then they took a backhoe and dug out this big pit and had a dirt ramp in there. And down this pit, I'm about 20 feet down, but about the height of this wall. And the reason why, my engines didn't always work, y'all. They'd explode. And they can make a real mess. So I didn't want to hurt these cows. So we built that down so I launch out like a silo. So I'm down in this pit, I'm working. And while I'm working on all these rockets, I look up, and completely around the circle of the pit is all these cows. And they're chewing away, watching me do my thing. They go, that's cool. They're watching. So I look up, it's like an OR room, with an amphitheater. I got all the, how y'all doing, So I'm working on rockets. They got to know me really well. If I walked out of the pit slowly, they'd all turn around and walk off. If I come running out of the pit, they all ran. So, hey, cows aren't dumb as you think they are. They're pretty smart animals. If that boy's running, leave, because there's going to be this big thing coming up out of there right after behind him. So they're used to seeing fireballs. So anyhow, I decided that when I get ready to launch, I'd come out of the pit and I'd go to my launch booth area. They'd all move over and actually herd into a crowd. And when a rocket go out of there, I could look over, and if I'd lose sight of it, I could watch where their heads are and pick up the sight, because they'd all go like this. 200 cows doing that. I got some pictures you wouldn't believe. Somebody go, how'd you get on cows to do that, My secret. So anyhow, I got to know these cows really well. And, pardon? Yeah. If NASA loses tracking device, they need to get some cows out there. They'll find it. They got great eyesight. So anyhow, they were pretty calm. So I tried a new rocket. This is a staging rocket, 2-stage. Has an engine on top and an engine on the bottom. All right. So this thing comes out of the pit, and it is just getting it. I mean, it's probably the fastest one I've built yet. When it gets right at the opening of the pit, which we call a vent horizon, it gets right at the opening, the second engine ignites. Both engines are now running. It blows the first stage back down to the pit, and it explodes in a fireball that comes back up. This is all in a millionth of a second. It knocks the rocket over on its side, even with the ground. And it is skipping. And it is just, it's a streak with a fire tail about the size of a semi behind it. And it's heading dead center for this herd of cows. And I'm standing there. It was the fastest prayer I ever got out in my life. Oh, God, save the cows, No sooner I could get that spit out, boy, the thing just did a nosedive in the ground. And now it's shaking. Fuel tank thruster blows up, huge fireball size of a school bus, blows up, and those cows are like from here to that wall. And I can look through the fireball, and I'll see it right now clear as ever. Their eyes, they're this big. And I'm standing there like, well, what's next? Next they did a perfect, just like in the Army, 180 degrees turn, all of them simultaneously. Boom, stampede. I thought, okay, good, they didn't get hurt. However, on a far side herd looking the other direction is this one cow that didn't see anything. So she disappears under the crowd. I went, oh, God. So I run over there. That cow is really bad looking. It's every bone, its spice broke. It's dead. It's just. So I'm sitting there going, oh, God, I've killed this cow. Well, here come all the farms and trucks heading up there. It's the farmers. Of course, they saw this giant fireball, and it sounded like a clap of thunder on a clear day. Must be David. So they ran up there. First thing they said, "You all right?" "Yeah, I don't think this cow's too good." And they looked at that cow and they go, "That cow's dead." I went. So they said, "Go back to they sent somebody back with a front end loader and come back and pick this cow up." They said, "You got to come back to the barn." I thought, "Oh God, I've lost my launch area. I'll never get to use this site. Oh man." And they're going to be upset. So I get back there and they take a chain hoist, put it around the cow's neck, and they hoist it up. And they tell me, "Well, normally we take these things to the slaughterhouse, but we don't have time because the blood will coagulate in the meat. So we got to do this quick." And they said, "You got to dress this cow." And I'm standing there and I'm going, why would I want to put a dress on this cow? Two of the farmers swallowed their plugs. Tobacco. And they are laughing. And no sooner than I said that, I hear this thing behind me, and I turn around and they hand me this chainsaw. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. Oh God. And I had to cut this cow. I'm up to my shoulders in this thing, digging out everything. And I'm turning every color of the rainbow. And the guy comes by with amber in his mouth. "You want a chaw?" Oh boy, they were having a great time. But the end of the story was, this is a black Angus cow, about 900 pounds, expensive animal. We ended up with a third of that cow for free in our freezer, and they didn't charge us anything. So my dad came home and goes, "That's not a bad day's work. You brought home a third of a cow." I said, "Yeah, but I tell you what, I'll work all the overtime you want in that shop to buy you a steak because I am not going to dress another cow." So anyhow, that's pretty much how I endured life with cows out where I launched stuff. Now back to current science here, but I thought you might appreciate that. Let's jump and let's see to the space station. Does anybody know the name of the United States space station they're trying to get built? No? Freedom. Boy, you're doing better than the average audience, but there is another one. Yeah, well, it's not settled yet. Politics are still working on it. Yeah. The thing is the way they do the budgets, that's called that. When we used to have the name up for Freedom, the in-house, maybe they changed it because we made an in-house joke. They can't ever seem to get the budget funding on this thing right. So we told them if we ever get the station up, we'd have Freedom at last. So, but they may have changed it. I haven't been paying attention because I don't even talk to them. Yeah. Boy, I choke up every time I think about the space station. Let me tell you a story about funding with the space station. I was in an open hearing. This was 10 years ago. And they came in, NASA did, and they laid the budget in front of the Senate Subcommittee on Science and Technology. And they said that this space station would cost around 35 to 40 billion. Some of us come up out of our seats, but nobody wanted to say anything. When the actual GSA and the OMB audit came out on this thing, it's $180 billion. A little slight difference. So Congress doesn't believe anything NASA submits, so they get into a big tug of war. So they have to do an R&D study, and that's where it got to be fun. They came up with a final study and a prototype that's set in a corner of the room over there. It looks like a big, ugly erector set. And the bill was $2 billion for this study. And you end up with an 8th grade erector set design. You gotta be kidding. Well, anyway, they tore that up and started over again. And you're paying for this. And it's all in the congressional records. They still haven't really got the designs right. And so the point to all this is I'm not sure when we're going to get the station up. They keep giving you a timeline that keeps slipping back, and you don't know what you're going to get. They keep redesigning, recutting. So for sake of argument, let's say that we're going to get something like this, which is called the string of linked sausages design. And that thing right there, that sausage link, is actually about the size of a single wide mobile home house trailer. So you pull it out and unscrew the caps, hook them together, the beam extender rolls out, put out your solar power blanket, and you got enough power there to house about 24 people year round. And it would look like something like this. Most people see that and go, a space diner. No, that's not what it is. There's a space habitat module there, and you have your supplies and avionics, life support systems on the upper and lower decks, and then you have the space that you'd work in. And here's where you'd have all the different stuff that you'd be working and personal hygiene. And now they have a regular commode up there. That's important. If you go to the bathroom, you're not going to use diapers now, would you? So, do you know anything about